Audio Jungle.
The Columbus Division Police is looking for a man known as Jamaican Rick who is accused of leading an enterprise to promote prostitution.
Andrew Harris, also known as Bobby Eric Smith, 54, is accused of compelling women into prostitution through extreme violence and of exploitation of their hearing addictions.
Police say in one incident a female was tortured with a blowtorch after refusing to perform several sex acts.
His associates, Thomas King and Mark Johnson, have been arrested. Police say Harry is still at large.
Anyone with information about his whereabouts is asked to call Detective Boyd at 619-77432.
At this moment, we have on the phone one of the victims of this crime. Her name is Yurlady Torres from Venezuela.
I am 32 years old. I am from Caracas, Venezuela. I worked for 10 years in a textile factory, but as a result of the crisis in my country, I decided to apply to a job overseas, and they promised me a good job with a good profits in Spain. So I did the corresponding procedures and I got to Spain. But my surprise was that the actual job was in a sex club, and in that place they forced me to be a prostitute. While working there, the person who tricked me made me give away all the money that I earned to him. In fact, all the money that I made was for him. I was captive in a dark room with 5 other women that also came from South America. We weren't properly fed and sometimes we received just water. They kept us monitored all day so we could not escape.
This was the breaking news of the week. This is an important topic, that's why we have focused on it.
First of all, it's important to know what is human trafficking. Trafficking with persons is a serious crime and a grave violation of human rights. Every year, thousands of women, men, and children fall into the hands of traffickers, and almost every country is affected by this. Whereas a country of origin, transit, of destination of the victims. And now we are going to watch a video about the elements of human trafficking, and it's important.
Elements of human trafficking. On the basis of the definition given in the Trafficking in Persons Protocol, it is evident that trafficking in persons has 3 constituent elements. The first one is the act. It is what is done. It could be recruitment, transportation or transfer, and harboring or receipt of persons. The second one is the means, how it is done. It can be receipt of payments or benefits, threat or use of force, coercion, deception, abduction or fraud, and abuse of power or position of vulnerability. And the third one is the purpose, why it is done, for the purpose of exploitation, which includes sexual exploitation or prostitution, slavery or servitude, removal of organs, and forced labor.
Talking about the purpose, the main purpose of trafficking is the illegal entry of migrants. They are used as sexual slaves, also they are forced to work hard, and they are placed to be organ donors. Usually these people that run this kind of business, they do it because they don't have consideration of other people and because they want a bigger money income.
According to the International Labour Organization, in 2015, it is estimated that forced labor alone, one of the components of human trafficking, generates 150 billion of profits per year. In 2016, it estimated that 21 million of victims are trapped in modern-day slavery. So, according to this, Human trafficking is one of the fastest growing activities in transnational crime organizations, so it's actually an important fact.
Many of these countries have gone through unstable governments over the last couple of years. Such can be seen in the cases of South Sudan, Yemen, Syria, and others. It is also difficult to get reliable, accessible data from some of these countries because they are very closed off and have a state-run media, such as in the case of North Korea and to a less extreme degree in Belarus. Even when dealing with the fairly developed nation of Russia, it is difficult to get actual data regarding the number of human trafficking victims. Some of these countries listed on the Tier 3 have corrupt governments who have turned a blind eye, or even worse, the governments themselves are directly involved in and profiting from the human trafficking trade. Tier 3 countries will be those with the presence of one or more of the three components of human trafficking. Looking at the primary component of human trafficking prevailing in each country, they are typically classified as either a source, where victims are taken from, transit, where victims are moved through, or destination, where victims are ultimately sold and resettled. North Africa. Algeria is primarily a transit country because of its prime geographical location for smugglers from sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East to get into Europe. It is also a destination country for human trafficking victims, primarily for the purpose of forced labor and prostitution. Libya also is a major transit country. Libya has been for years experiencing civil unrest and violence, both of which are making it relatively easy for smugglers to get through Libyan borders unhindered. Without a strong Libyan government, it is almost impossible to combat human trafficking and to enforce anti-human trafficking laws. South Sudan has corrupt government officials that are actively involved in the prostitution of trafficking victims and forced labor. A lot of victims in South Sudan, apart from the South Sudanese themselves, are from Uganda, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and the Congo. South Sudan is especially vulnerable to exploitation because of the violence that had been occurring for years, creating large displaced and orphaned populations in turn, both of whom are groups particularly susceptible to human trafficking. In many cases, operations are not carried out by widespread human trafficking cartels, but instead by local family-run businesses. Trafficking victims are subjected to forced labor or sexual exploitation in the Middle East. In many cases in the Middle East, citizens from poorer nearby countries willingly go to Kuwait or Yemen for normal work under misleading pretenses, but then see their rights stripped away before they are forced into servitude. Meet with your local, state, and federal government representatives to let them know you care about combating human trafficking and ask what they are doing to address it.
Encourage your local schools to partner with students and include modern slavery in their curricula. As a parent, educator, or a school administrator, be aware of how traffickers target school-aged children.
Students, take action on your campus. Join or establish a university club to raise awareness about human trafficking and initiate action throughout your local community. Consider doing one of your research papers on a topic concerning human trafficking.
Learn the indicators of human trafficking so you can help identify a potential trafficking victim. Human trafficking awareness training is available for individuals, business, law enforcement, educators, among others.
Can we stop human trafficking? The major commonality among these countries is poverty and violence. These socioeconomic factors create situations where people are willing to be illegally trafficked because they are desperate for a better life. There will be fewer people willing to do such malicious jobs if the countries they lived in had more economic opportunities to offer, as well as better monitoring and law enforcement practices that would make their arrest, prosecution, and punishment for trafficking more probable. Violence and civil unrest creates vulnerable populations of people, and this also contributes to the large-scale problems seen in many of the countries on the Tier 3 list.
A strong government, education, and economic and social security seems to be the most effective way to combat human trafficking for both the victims and the perpetrators. There needs to be enough opportunities for people so that they will not be so desperate as to willingly place themselves, or even more concerningly, their children in situations where they are likely to end up being trafficked.